The day I got laid off, I was gonna give myself 3 weeks to reset. I knew that 3 weeks was gonna be enough time for me to come back ready to work. And I really didn't have a perfect plan. I didn't have like a blueprint to how I was gonna get this started, but I just knew one thing, that I was not going back to corporate. So I really had to figure out how I was gonna start a business. So in this video, what I'm gonna do is share all of those steps to how I started a solo consulting business, which has now fully expanded into a content agency, a video production agency. From the day that I got laid off, what I did during those weeks off, and how I came back and just kind of figured it out. So this is kind of a continuation from the last video, or one of the previous videos that I uploaded, which was called I Quit YouTube, Went Back to Corporate, Got Laid Off, something like that. So why don't we start from the day that I got laid off? We'll start our story in that moment. So the day that I got laid off. So it was a regular old Tuesday morning, and I got the call. Oh my God, if I fucking fall, holy shit. Okay, gotta focus. So I got the call, it happened, and it was just simply an email. And then of course my manager called me and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it doesn't matter how it went down, but the way that I reacted to it was I literally just went about the rest of my day as if nothing happened. I am super task driven, almost to a toxic level. So that happened, and then I was like, okay, what's next on my to-do list? Grocery shopping? Cool. So I drove to Trader Joe's in the parking lot right before I got out of the car. That's when it hit me. I was fully overcome with all of my emotions. I wasn't scared. I wasn't worried about money. I was just upset. I worked so hard. I put in so much time and effort, and it didn't matter. You know, I got laid off anyway. But listen, that's corporate. You give everything and it means nothing. So I sat in my car and I cried for like 30 minutes. Honestly, that release just made me feel so much better. So then I went inside, I got my groceries, went to the gym, went on a walk, and then I spent the rest of the day just thinking, which was like something that I hadn't had time for, to just sit and think. I'm gonna get off of this. This is kind of freaking me out. So I'm not the kind of person who needs to call people when I'm going through something. Like, what I really need, and this is just the way that I think things through and process things, is I just need a lot of alone time. I just need alone time to like sit and think everything through and kind of like sit with my feelings. And so after that day, I sat down, thought about it, and made a very, very concrete decision. So I was gonna give myself 3 weeks. 3 full weeks away from everything. No laptop, no emails, no social media, no content creation. So what do I do when I get time off? Book a solo trip. So I booked a solo trip through Eastern Europe. I traveled through Albania, Serbia, Macedonia, and Kosovo. And it's because I have always wanted to finish traveling all of the Balkan countries, or all of the former Yugoslavia countries, Yugoslavian nation. And so I went, and I didn't think about work once. And here's the thing, like, I never once thought to myself, maybe I should just apply for another job. I never once thought that maybe I can't do what I'm trying to set myself up to get to, because I gave myself those 3 weeks to rest. I gave myself a deadline, and I knew that by telling myself, okay, all of this time is just my personal time, I knew that after 3 weeks I was gonna come back so refreshed, energetic, and ready to work. And so look, I didn't come back with a perfect plan. I didn't come back with like a set blueprint. I didn't come back saying to myself, now I'm just gonna like Google things and like find a course, or, you know, listen to some podcasts. Like, that was not in my, I wasn't like, I'm gonna go back to school. Like, no. Just fucking get in there and start doing the work. Stop trying to listen to make a plan for things. Stop, you know, saying to yourself that like, oh, as soon as I do this thing, or as soon as I get X, Y, Z done, then I'll be ready. There's never a time when I felt ready. It was just that like the day I got back, I was like, all right, this is the day I'm getting into the work. Because I knew one thing, and that was just this. I wasn't gonna go back to corporate. So I had to figure out how to start a business. So I got back from that trip and I immediately started prospecting. And I'm gonna walk you through exactly how I did this. So first, I reached out to every single person I knew from the company that had just laid me off. I sent out emails, I made phone calls, I set up coffee and drink dates. Then I went through a list of every single person I'd had a close relationship with since my first ever tech job at Lyft. I worked there when I was 23. I launched Lyft across the country. And here's the thing, like a lot of those people I hadn't talked to in years, but I still maintained some sort of loose relationship with them. Like I still connected with them on LinkedIn. I liked their posts occasionally. I reached out to them and messaged them every once in a while. And now, 10 years later, a lot of them were in C-level positions. So I reached out to all of them. So all in all, I sent 10 emails, made 10 phone calls, and set up 10 different coffee and drinks. Most of that didn't really directly lead me anywhere, but I was just trying to put my name out there. I was trying to tell people what I was doing and tell them what I was looking for. And then after all of that, I sent one LinkedIn message to an old colleague from Lyft that I saw who had been working in climate and sustainability, which is the industry that I'd just been working in. And my message to her was literally like 2 sentences. It wasn't even a pitch. It was just something like, hey, I was just working at this company doing social media production for a B2B climate and sustainability company. I saw you've been at your company for a while. Have you ever looked into social media production? At that point, I was just like, fuck it. What's the worst that could happen? And man, I can't tell you this enough in entrepreneurship. This is what I've realized so many times. Timing is everything. Because she responded immediately because they were actively looking for someone. They needed someone who understood B2B social media, who had experience in climate and sustainability, and who knew how to do LinkedIn specifically, which is very different from YouTube and Instagram. So the irony of this is getting laid off actually gave me the skills I needed to land my first client. So we ended up having 4 pitch meetings, and I spent hours and hours preparing for this pitch meeting. Like, I built entire presentations from scratch. I researched the company background, I found their logos, I found their hex codes. So I made the pitch deck look exactly like it was created inside their company. And then before each meeting, I would rehearse out loud the pitch over and over again. I practiced that pitch so many times that I could handle any objection they threw at me. And so here's how I priced it. So I got my calculator out and I just like ran through some numbers. My corporate salary was about $13,000 a month before taxes. After taxes, it was like about $8,000. So for this first client, I pitched them at $8,000 a month. We negotiated because there's always negotiations involved, and we landed at $7,000. And so here was the scope. I was gonna be available 10 hours a week, run weekly meetings with their team, and I was also gonna deliver a month's worth of content for Instagram, LinkedIn, and then we like cross-posted to Facebook and YouTube and Twitter at the time. Plus I set up their entire production system and was, tasked with getting pretty much everyone I could at the company involved in social media production. So they said yes. And then 2 weeks later, I got my second client. So I just signed with the first big client and then I got another one. Different industry, but I had spent so many hours prepping that pitch for that first client that the second one, I was like so well versed in everything that I had to offer, my, what I was gonna do for them, the production system, everything, that in 2 weeks I had a second conversation and I freaking landed that client. I was so confident because I handled all the objections that the last client, and I priced the second client at $8,000 a month. So I increased my prices because I had built that confidence. So 3 months after getting laid off and not really knowing how the fuck I was gonna go about doing this, I landed 2 clients, the first one at $7K monthly retainer, the second at $8K monthly retainer, which was a lot more than corporate salary was paying me. And I was just getting started. Here's what nobody tells you about starting a solo consulting business. So I told those clients that I would be available for 10 hours a week. But in those first 3 months, I was working like 25 to 30 hours a week. And that was for each client. Because the beginning of working with any client or any business is like always gonna be chaotic and nightmarish. There's so much research. You have to like dig into learning about an entire company, figuring out their systems, meeting everyone, understanding what they actually need versus what they want. So I set up a 30, 60, 90-day plan for both clients. So at 30 days, I would have the entire production system like fully set up and ready to go. At 60 days, days, I'd met everyone in the departments and knew exactly what they were doing, like their roles, responsibilities, and how they're gonna contribute to the media side. And then at 90 days, everyone was hopefully gonna be invested and everyone was gonna be contributing. Oh, but here's the thing about a 30, 60, 90-day plan when you're in social media. So the content starts within like a week. Like you have to start producing content as soon as you get started because the machine needs to keep running while you're figuring everything out behind the scenes. So we were creating content, I was running meetings, I was managing the whole like social media video production system, all while simultaneously doing all the research, setting up all the systems and learning the company and meeting everyone. For both clients again. So that's why those first 3 months I was working like probably 60 to 70 hours for the week because both of these companies didn't really have anything set up. So I was literally building the plane while I was flying it. And that took some work. So I sent out surveys to the entire company. I spoke to the social media managers who were in those positions before they had also been laid off. I spent hours and hours researching. And then I just learned that like consulting wasn't what I thought it was gonna be. I thought it was gonna be a couple calls here and there, prepping for calls, having the calls, doing work after, maybe send some emails, done. But when you're dealing with the entire company, especially with companies that have lean marketing teams because everyone's going through layoffs or workforce reductions, you have limited resources, so you kind of actually have to do the actual work. You can't just say, I only do strategy calls, I don't do any execution. You have to take on all the roles. Like I was the executive producer, I was the project manager, I'm the strategist looking at the numbers, I'm making all the presentations, I'm holding the weekly meetings. But let me tell you, that was so freaking valuable that I did all that work because now I know how to do all of those roles. And when I eventually started hiring people, I knew exactly what I needed from them and how to train them. The hardest part though was both of these companies had the same problem that so many companies and so many content creators or I guess aspiring content creators and individuals do. They had hundreds and hundreds of video files that weren't optimized for social media. People were just like shooting and capturing and the whole goal was volume. They just like captured everything and like a lot of the video files weren't really that usable and they were all in horizontal and they're just like filming random stuff. If you are a creative or if you're an editor, please drop a comment. Tell me that you understand what I'm saying. People want to just give you hundreds and hundreds of files and be like, make something good. You're just like, what? Like, okay, I guess you're just gonna expect me to spend hours and hours and hours going through all of this footage. Anyway, you get what I mean. That's not how it works. You have to be intentional with what you're capturing. Yes, you can use a lot of footage that you may have captured in the past, but like there still has to be something behind it. There still has to be like a narrator of some kind or a spokesperson or someone guiding us through the whole thing. So anyway, found what was usable and then create a system for capturing content the right way moving forward. So now you might be thinking like, well, was there a low point? Was there at some point you got overwhelmed or like you wanted to quit? And the answer is no. I was so grateful that I had closed these clients and I was willing to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week for both of them and really willing to put in the work. I was not afraid of doing all that work. And on top of this all, right when I landed that first and second client, I had had surgery on my ACL and I couldn't walk for 8 weeks. So I was pretty much just like bedridden and working my butt off while also trying to heal this. And like I was on crutches for 8 weeks and it was a whole thing. What I was going through mentally with healing and not being able to walk for 2 weeks, I was basically like channeling all of that, I don't know, lowness and like sadness through my work, basically. So even if I was getting overwhelmed with work, like for me, it was so much worse to like not be walking for 8 weeks and like nothing could have touched how hard it was to not have like my body basically. So even though I was getting overwhelmed at work, there was like a lot of problems we had to solve. I didn't see that as a low point. Like that was just work. That wasn't really a low point. Like this, my freaking surgery and 8 weeks of not walking, like that was the low point. And so I was going through both of those things at the same time. And in terms of like financially, I had a lot of saving. I had just spent like 7 years as a YouTuber with like pretty inconsistent income or just, you know, trying to rely on the next brand deal and rely on AdSense. And so I was used to managing money that way. I've always been really good about putting like a small chunk of whatever my earnings are into my savings. And I also have a financial advisor. So note on that, if you don't have a financial advisor, you should definitely get one. They're an expert. They're gonna help you manage your money. They're gonna help you make more money. Okay, I'm not a financial expert or anything, but it's definitely helped. And then if we're talking about all the legal stuff, like I totally winged all that. I found a contract template online. I created invoices in Pages, the app on your Mac computer. And like now in my agency, everything, you know, all this is automated. But at the time, I was just like figuring it out as I went. And also thank God ChatGPT was out by that time, because I basically was just asking ChatGPT, what do I need to make sure that I'm like fully set up as a contractor for a corporate company? And honestly, this is fine for your like first few clients, but if you're at month 6 and you know that you're gonna be in this for the next couple of years, like definitely hire a lawyer. Definitely get a lawyer to write you the contract. Even if you're a freelancer or if you're a contractor, don't wing the legal stuff forever. So around month 4, we actually started seeing like real results, like real measurable results. And for my first client, they were growing on LinkedIn about like 300 to 400 followers a month, which doesn't sound like a lot, but on LinkedIn it is a lot, especially when you're a really small channel. And it wasn't just follower count. Every single other metric was also increasing too. Engagements, impressions, click-throughs, like the data proved it was working. And organic, oh my God, organic social media is such a tedious grind. So that got people really excited at the company to contribute to social media. It gave them like a voice. They were invested in the storytelling part of it. And here's the thing that I didn't expect after working through both of these clients within the first few months, also not being able to walk. I realized very quickly that I could not do any of this alone. I was managing production for 2 companies, content creation, writing the copy, scheduling posts, managing analytics, running the meetings, coordinating with different departments. And I was like fucking maxing out. Like I physically could not take on more work. And I couldn't walk. So then I hired my first contractor, a copywriter, because I really needed help crafting the brand messaging and the social media copy, especially for climate and sustainability is one, and then healthcare is the other. Like you're taking these really dense evidence-based research papers and then turning that into stories that like normal people could resonate with. And so that's when I realized that I wasn't just being like a consultant or a contractor, I was actually like expanding into a content agency, because I was building the brands, I was telling their stories, I was really establishing how they presented themselves outwardly on social media. Like I was helping these companies kind of figure out their voice and their messaging and their entire brand identity on social media. And so when I hired that copywriter, that made me understand that I'm not just like building a consulting business, I'm actually building an agency. Here is like the difference, okay? Consulting is you. It's your time, it's your expertise, it's your hours, but an agency is a team. And like an agency has systems and that can scale. And so I really was like at a crossroads at this point, because it's like I had a choice to make. I could stay a solo consultant, I could keep my clients, I could try to keep my hours manageable, like make good money and just maintain that, or I could actually build something bigger. And honestly, after spending all that time in corporate learning how to build systems and manage people and scale production, I knew how to do this, but I just had to decide if I wanted to. So if you're thinking about starting your own thing after leaving corporate, here's what I would tell you. First, use your network. Even if you haven't talked to people in so many years, those relationships that I built when I was 23 at my first job at Lyft, it paid off when I was 32. And you don't have to be best friends with everyone. You just have to maintain loose connections somehow, like stay in touch. I mean, it's so easy to stay in touch with people with social media and especially with LinkedIn these days. You just never know when the timing is going to align in your favor. Second, timing is everything, but you create your timing by showing up. Like I didn't know that my old colleague was looking for someone, but I reached out anyway, and it was like this kind of careless, pitiless LinkedIn message through the LinkedIn DMs. And it just so happened to be the right time. And if I hadn't sent that message, someone else would have gotten that client. The next thing is you've got to over deliver, at least in the beginning, but you got to know what you're worth. I worked 3 times the hours I charged for the first few months. And that's totally okay in the beginning. You're just figuring out, you're trying to build the system. This is like your learning time. You do have to track your time. You have to actually know what you're putting in, because eventually you do need to readjust your scope or your pricing. The next one, number 4, is, and this is like super, super important, practice your sales pitch so much that you could handle any objection. That's what those calls were. Those calls were sales calls. And I knew that it required so much practicing, making sure that I could field all the questions and set myself up and prepare myself for every single scenario of what they would ask me and every objection, handle all the objections. Confidence comes from preparation. and practice. And preparation comes from actually doing the work. The next takeaway I would say is you could wing the legal stuff at first, but I would highly recommend that you formalize it by month 6. Once you know that this is real, that you're actually going to keep doing this for quite a long time, or some time at least, like hire a lawyer, get a real contract, set up a proper system, and protect yourself. Does that sound on? Okay. The biggest thing I learned, I would say, is that it's gonna be so much harder than you think. Starting up your business. For me, consulting, what I thought was just gonna be calls, it's not just calls, it's all the execution. But that's how you learn everything. That's how you figure out what you're actually good at and what you probably need help with. So I didn't follow a course. I didn't have a blueprint for this. I didn't even have a plan for this. I just knew I wasn't gonna go back to corporate, and so I knew that I had to figure this out. And I'm still figuring this out. I started that solo consulting business 2.5 years ago. I'm only 2.5 years in. That's like such a young business. That's not that much time at all. So you gotta find something that you actually like working on. I wouldn't recommend that you follow your passion, because I personally think follow your passion is the worst career advice anyone could actually give you, and it might actually ruin your life. And maybe that's a whole explanation for another time. But you gotta find something that you're curious about, because curiosity is actually what makes you get better. It's the curiosity that actually keeps you going when things get really hard. And things will be really hard. It just depends on which hard you wanna choose. I choose this hard because I worked for corporate twice already, and I realized that that's not for me. I would so much rather be working on this. So if any of you are in the same position at all, drop a comment. If you have any questions ever throughout this whole thing, send me a DM on Instagram. I'm in my DMs all the time, talking to all of you about all of the things in life. So thank you for being here, and I'll see you next week. Peace.